technology is absolutely drastically affecting our behaviors and our conversations, and it's already changed so much. So it's this thing of, we actually need to rein in technology. We actually need to be, what I say to people is, okay, you may choose not to use technology, and I will applaud you for that. But you need to know what technology is actually doing. Because if you're not cognizant, you can't have the conversation. You can't give advice to the people around you. You can't feel agency in your own world if you feel isolated from a reality, because it is a reality.
Hi, Marie-Louise. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here with you. I'm slightly excited for this.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. Absolutely. We're going to dive straight into it, which is first question always, Marie-Louise, what's important to you?
Yeah, I'm going to put aside like my little close bubble of family and close family and secondary family and very close friends. So take that as a given. But I suppose in my life, what has been important for me and how I've tried to live is to be part of enabling things to move forward in life, being part of, I don't quite want to say the solution, but removing barriers and letting us move. Um, so in all my life, I was always a person who enabled things to happen, sometimes to the detriment of what was going on around me, but other times it's been great. It's really taken me a while because I've spent, when I'm coming to talk to you, and I know that question is part of your podcast, I've been really reflecting of why is that? Why has that been my
Hmm.
modus of operations? And I suppose it went back to my mother was widowed when we were very young, and my father was much loved, and I heard loads of things. But there was a man, so he died in the early 70s. So hopefully I'm not aging myself here desperately, but anyway, in a very, very different time. And at the graveside, there was a poem read about my father, and it always resonated with me. And now it was really funny because I did go and root it out again, but the refrain of the poem was, I saw Casey, he was there. And it was that thing of he was there. And it was the thing back in the 70s, somebody recognized that my father was seeing people who would not necessarily be seen. He was hearing people that would not necessarily have been heard. And he was reaching out to people that wouldn't. So that would not necessarily have been included in a time when there was no cognizance of DEI or inclusion or,
Hmm.
empathy. Now, he was the head of the generation department in the ESB, so he was a senior person. So when a person who was not a senior person sent this poem to my mother and it was read at the graveside, it really resonated with me, even though I was a child. So it
Hmm.
resonated with me as a child. And when I went into the workplace, I always wanted to emulate that he was there. He came over, he reached out, he spoke to me. So I've always been a person who has sort of been that person who um, will talk to people. Therefore, I'm on the podcast. But,
Yeah.
it would be that thing of seeing people where they're at um, and sort of being there for them. And like, obviously, I was preteen when my father died, and my teenage years were a bit chaotic because lots of things happen and blah blah blah. And I started my work life as an early, I'm going to say in when I was 15. So my education more or less stopped. My formal school
Yeah.
education more or less stopped at that age, and I started working in the Department of Tax way back in the mid 70s. So I kind of had an energy but I managed for other people. I managed for the people around me. And when there was chaos, I always was that person who was trying to, okay, what can we do today? And, I would sort out stuff for people. I didn't necessarily deal with my own emotional stuff, but, I kept that
Yeah.
nice and buried, which came back to get me in my 50s. But anyway, that's a different story. But I was that kind of manager around, and I would try and facilitate other people to be able to move forward. And the people around me, I would do that. Now, at times, I drove people insane. I was probably OCD. Like, when I would see if there was a mess in the house, I would put all the spices in the cupboard in alphabetical order. Not really very helpful, but to me, it was ordering things.
Yeah.
So I had lots of really things, but I kind of always adopted that thing of what can we do now and how can we move forward. So it's starting work very early. There was logic in my own head for that. But I did get into AIB very early on. I must have been the late 70s. I started in AIB, and it was really quite interesting because after 2 years, I was there to my manager. Again, a very interesting conversation in the 70s, because I said to my manager, I think I'll leave. I think I'll go back to school. I think I've got energy and I've got capability, and I'm wasted here. I can do this and I've mastered it. And he said, I agree with you. He said, your energy is too much to be contained here. But he said, do me a favor. He said, AIB are running some aptitude tests, and they're looking for people to be dealers or to be people. He said, I don't really know what it is, but they're setting up a computer department. And he said, they're looking for people for computers. I have no idea what that is, he said to me. He said, do the aptitude tests, and if you get them, stick with it for 2 years. And if you don't like it, if you get them, do it for 2 years. And if you love it, stay with it. And if you don't, you're right, go somewhere else, you're wasted.
Yeah.
Which was a conversation that in the 70s really wasn't happening. But I did get into the newly formed IT department, and it really suited me because I was enabling stuff and I was delivering solutions and I was able to manage. And I was in an environment that we became known in some areas as the young guns. We were all young. We were all learning something new. We were all breaking barriers because this hadn't happened before. Like, I'm going to tell you some of the projects I worked on. You will laugh because some people will say, what the hell? So we delivered the first PCs in Ireland that arrived in Ireland from IBM.
Wow.
We implemented ATMs. We brought in online banking. So I was at that innovation time. So really feeding into my thing of what can we do? What can we move forward? What can we, how can we manage this? We can provide solutions. So it was really tied into a time of great excitement and my need for creating order. And I was able to bring order through because I worked as a computer operator, computer programmer, systems analyst, system support, hardware support, software support. I did everything. So I worked in AIB for about 15 years, really fed into my need to manage and organize. So really some of my bad behaviors were being rewarded because also as young guns, we also got promoted very quickly because we were the next generation,
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting time because it was also a transformational time in society. Ireland, as my mother would say back then, Ireland was getting the smell of itself. We were coming from a third world country into a first world country. It was the 80s. It was, I'm going to say, Wolf of O'Connell Street as opposed to Wall Street, but we were out in the Bank Centre in Donnybrook, so we were the wolves of Donnybrook, I often laugh when I read the Irish Times, Ross O'Carroll Kelly, because we drank parties all the time. But we were those changers and innovators and the new generation. And it was a very exciting time to be there. And it was funny because I saw actual transformation as well. So today,
Yeah.
when we're in the tsunami of change, Ireland has had a tsunami of change. Through the 70s, we were a
Mm.
third world country. I played, like, I was born in the 60s, so like I was a child running around in the 60s. When they show pictures in Reeling in the Years of everybody going on a Corpus Christi march, I was one of those people on the Corpus Christi march in my little white dress with the papal flag. So
Yeah.
I've we've seen that massive transformation. We had those discussions of societal change and impact and what kind of society do we want to be, where Ireland joined the EU and we got roads, we got transport, we got,
Mm.
farming grants, etc. So I've seen that really big transformation, and I know we're in a transformation again. So what matters for me now is I like my behaviors of managing and doing and everything led me to a very successful career. I left the bank in the 80s, but I went into pharma and I was head of IT in a pharma company for 20 years and then got promoted
Wow.
because it was a multinational, obviously.
Yeah.
Got promoted to their industry department and I was responsible for leading the digital transformation program for 11 factories. So I was having conversations with the board of a multinational, saying, okay, we can do this digital transformation. This is what it'll mean. And I could have a conversation and I could get buy-in from them. I could get budget from them, limited, depending,
Yeah.
justifiable budget. But when I talk to them, that senior level, about you need to change how you're behaving, you need to change the conversations you're having with people because the impact of this digital transformation is fundamentally changing how work is happening.
Mm.
And they were there going, what did you say the budget need was? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you say we'll be able to showcase at the next industry, blah, blah. Oh, we're going to have robotics here. Oh, we're going to use big data for our supporting our managers. Oh, we're going to be able to show the line. And I was there going, yes, but you have a techno stress with the people who are working in industry because you're saying to them, you're now empowered. Your work is changing. You're going to become advanced problem solvers. Yeah, and it's great. Isn't this great? And we've all the tools to support you, but you're not, and I'm there going, but you're not changing how you're talking to them.
Yeah.
You're not changing how you're communicating. You're not building a relationship with them that will say, oh, yes, I am actually empowered. They value what I'm saying. I'm now a peer. I'm not all the automation is really impacting where we are today. It's taking out
Mm.
a middle layer. It's appearing in the workplace now, but it has been going on in social media where you have the trolls because people who previously didn't have a voice have a voice. Now
Yeah.
you've good trolls and bad trolls, but people who never had a voice have a voice now, and everybody believes their voice is equal. Whether that's true or not,
Yeah.
that's a different conversation. But it is the people who believe they are leaders need to know they can't talk down to people. They're no
Yeah.
longer at the top of a pyramid
Mm.
and they no longer hold the knowledge that's going to unlock the future. The knowledge is no longer based at the top of an organization. It's dispersed
Yeah.
and it's
It's
democratized
complete.
within an organization. So
Yeah.
that
You literally,
conversation, I
you
was
literally
I
just
was
took
hitting
that
a brick
word.
wall with
Yeah.
that conversation.
Mm.
Yeah. And I just sort of said, okay, I spent 6 years doing that job, and I just sort of said, okay, there are companies ready to move. There are companies ready to that are I could say emotionally intelligent. That all of the management is emotionally intelligent, and some of the management where I was, but some of them were so reluctant to examine themselves to say, I need to behave differently in this new organization. It's emerging. We do not have the answer today, but we still have to move forward. If we stay static, it's a real case of mind the gap. And if you stay static, that gap is getting bigger and you'll never be able to traverse it. But if you start moving and I'm going to say not overcommitting, but understanding that you need to be changing and at least doing the internal work on yourself so that you are working towards an equitable future where you are now working in peer-to-peer networks, not working in hierarchies, you have some hope of being able to respond to what's actually unfolding.
Yeah.
So I went back to now I want to enable people. So I see an awful lot happening at grassroots, and that's really where I think the new models will come from.
Yeah.
Smaller models and ecosystems, and, it'll grow up. And also, I talked earlier about the 80s. The 80s was the start of the greed. And, I understand profit and I understand business. I understand the need to be able to reinvest, etc. But there is greed out there, and greed has cost us huge amounts in climate, in distrust, in everything, So I also understand that business now isn't about an insular organization. It's about an ecosystem of connected organisms, whether it's your suppliers, your customers, your neighbors where you live, the actual ground you're discharging into. So I'm loving working with people who are prepared to work with the ecosystem. And having worked in industry, I went through the program of KPIs and the quality production, finance, logistics, whack-a-mole, if you increase quality, you decrease cost. Then we'll put in a new KPI to decrease cost, and, your quality goes out the window, or your productivity. So I just want to sort of look at the ecosystem and speak for those who are losing their voice and helping them to understand that the future is human.
Yeah.
The future relies on being human. The future relies on communities, communication, collaboration, partnerships. We can support all that with AI, and we can support it with tools, but we need to be human in the digital world because it's our differentiator.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more on that last piece, but it's so much in there. Thank you so much for sharing that run through. No, it's good. No, because there's so much in it, because it's so interesting. One, your career throughout and what you did, and then you say that very much always at the forefront of the changing in technology. And I was one of the things that when you were saying that, being sort of literally at the forefront of when it was first coming in, the first computers, so everything was a first, and you were there at the first of anything that was coming through within the workplace. And you were saying about the whole thing of enabling. Is that when you're doing any of these things, even going back to that first start of it, there's one part of it where it's exciting because it's new for you and the sort of wanting to get involved, and it's something new for yourself to be challenged. Feels like you needed that challenge for, something to keep you interested. But were you conscious of then the impact it was going to have on what we say, the customer, the end user, the person? So like when you said you're putting in ATMs, was that a conscious thing, or is it just pure excitement of doing something new?
Well, it's very funny. I suppose the first realization of the impact would have come because in the very late 80s, early 90s, it must have been, there was a big bank strike because AIB restructured how they were recruiting, because they deemed then that when I first joined the bank, there was no recruitment from university. Everybody came in as school leavers, and went through the bank's academy, let's call it.
Yeah.
So they had an internal It was run between 4 banks. The banks had a gentleman's agreement that they wouldn't, if I left AIB, I couldn't go to Bank of Ireland. There was a kind of, so the 4 banks operated like an academy where they trained bank officials, and anybody who rose through the ranks of the banks started as a school leaver. So it was a closed shop. And in the early 90s, they changed that to start graduate recruitment, which was perceived to be a 2-tier recruiting, but it was also alongside online banking coming in and paper banking completely going.
Yes.
And it was that thing of, because we used to laugh saying, okay, everything will be so automated, Bank Centre will be run by an Alsatian. We used to say, we'll only need people to feed the Alsatian, and that was the joke, because we were going to automate everything. But yes, there was that cost of, what will the humans do?
Yeah.
There was that conversation back in the 90s. And it was that thing of new titles came. Now, just off the top of my head, I can't think of a new title at that time. But new titles came, like, I'm going to say about 8-10 years ago, we started seeing data scientists, data analysts, data engineers, and they all have subtle differences to what they do.
Yeah.
We're now seeing prompt analysts and blah, blah, blah. So new things happen. And yet, so all those people, even though there was a big strike because the discussion wasn't happening, all those, and there were redundancies, because in actual fact, 1993, I took a redundancy from the bank because I sort of said, my circumstances had changed. I'd married and I'd had children, and I wanted a different trajectory. But I was also seeing those conversations were happening. But I saw that once the calm had come, once the reset had happened, people were evolving into the new normal, know. And it's funny because in that time, in one level, that technology effect was only happening in business, because personal computers didn't really come to people until probably 96, 97. So it was a bit later that PCs came to the home. The home change, and Ireland had changed as itself, because Dublin got regenerated into the I'm going to say Riverdance made us different. We got that was part of the regeneration of Dublin. The area around Temple Bar, the old CIE depot was knocked down, I'd say in 85, 86, and the restart of regeneration of Temple Bar. The Point was developed around then. We had a Eurovision there. We did tall ships in 86. So we got this thing of, oh, maybe we're not so hicky as we used to think we are.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not farmers that can only sell dairy gold, We are something. And we started having that, our Celtic tiger started to roar then, So we had a cultural change happening independent of technology. But we had the workplace being affected by technology.
Yeah.
The technology and internet happened later, really. So now the difference is technology and society are changing in parallel. And the technology is absolutely drastically affecting our behaviors and our conversations. And it's already changed so much. So it's this thing of, we actually need to rein in technology. We actually need to be, what I say to people is, okay, you may choose not to use technology, and I will applaud you for that. But you need to know what technology is actually doing.
Yeah.
Because if you're not cognizant, you can't have the conversation. You can't give advice to the people around you. You can't feel agency in your own world if you feel isolated from a reality, because it is a reality.
Hi, James here. If you've been watching and thinking, I would like to make a change, but not sure where to start, that's where I can help. My 12-week coaching program will enable you to reconnect with what matters most and move forward with clarity and confidence. If that sounds like you, head over to jamesdeancoach.com. Now let's get back to the episode. 100%. And I think it's, excuse me, I think it's interesting because someone, even the most sort of person, who feels that they're not, as you say, that technologically minded or into it or whatever the case may be, they probably don't realize how much of an impact it's already having on their life in whatever they do. I think of the most simple things, because it's even now, for example, I think back to say, like, simple example, my parents, when they would have bought, they used to tell me when they had their first cars, and this would have been back in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, that every week it was such a banger, they had to like strip the engine every weekend and then put it back together to keep it going for another week. And that was, my mum and dad would basically be able to strip an engine of a car, clean it out, put it back together, and the car would go again. You wouldn't touch from any car, now, because
an electric car,
everything. Yeah, or even like a modern sort of petrol or diesel, because the amount of electronics and computerization of any vehicle now, it all gets plugged into diagnostics and everything. So you just, so it's, unless you're looking at a classic or, you know what I mean, a vintage car, like, so that, in something as simple as a car, what we think is something simple, everything is permeated every part of our lives in sense of technology. And but the point you said now is this, going back to the point you said about in the workplace, though, the difference with now in the technology, that more people there's some people who maybe aren't as involved in it, aware of it, but there's plenty of people who are, and will, if anything, know more than the people above. The power shift has very much changed in that regard.
Yes, yeah. It's a big different dynamic. And it's, you kind of think I hear a lot of companies saying, oh, yeah, well, we're investing in skills. And I'm just like going, okay, but that is so one dimensional.
Yes.
And I love throwing out as a big challenge to say, how big is your training? I would say to somebody sometimes, how big is your training budget? And, I'd say, why don't you just give it to the people to spend as they like? And they look at me as if I'm mad. And I'd say, well, there's a potential here that some people will never adapt to the future landscape. They don't want to. They may want to be, I don't know, Nigella Lawson. Let them go and do a cookery course. And then when it comes to sort of saying we're downsizing, that person may have already left to set up to work in a cookery or thing.
Yeah.
Give them ownership of where they're at. Meet them where they're at. Have the conversations, because not everybody wants to stay in your workplace. Even without technology changing, there's often people who don't want to be in your workplace.
It's really interesting thing there, because and I think this comes back to the whole point you said about before, is having those human conversations, because you said the example before when you're trying to talk to the board or whatever about the impact that this advancement of technology is going to have, and how we need to be able to communicate and how we talk differently, but they're more interested about what they see are the positive impacts, whether it's on the return of investment, how shiny something is that they can show off, you know what I mean, versus, again, that human connection. But I often thought the point you just said there about people in a workplace wanting to do what they want to do and having that own agency to do stuff, because it reminded me, you just said that I worked in financial services for a number of years myself, and when I was towards the end of my sort of time in there, when I was looking at personal training, and then I looked at life coaching. So those two things. And I was going to the company and saying, look, is there any budget for me to train in these areas? Because I was also like hosting a run club. I was doing classes for them. I was doing like seminars on coaching aspects and stuff. So I was doing like giving back on a volunteer basis. But there was no budget because it wasn't in the framework of financial services. Do you know what I mean? But it's that kind of like what could be missed out on in that regard,
Yeah. And that is the thing, because the further we go into this, the more it's, because you also look, we're in a multi-generational workplace, and the leaders who are there are not going to be the leaders who are going to be at the end part of this as well. So
Yeah.
the expectation of the upcoming leaders also has to be accommodated. And we're hearing things like work-life harmony. You know, somebody said to me, think back to your grandparents. My grandparents lived in a farm down in the mid country. So, okay, I'm talking late 1800s. My grandparents lived there. They worked for necessity, for no other reason. They worked, they grafted, they did whatever. My father's generation worked for standard of living. They were very fortunate in that they got the opportunity because we got a new state in you know, we were, he came up, he would have been born in 1921. He came up in a time of opportunity if you had education. So he worked for standard of living, you know, so he worked for the car. But when I started working, I was working for the second car, the holiday, so standard of living is, and I'm not going to say that now because it's a bit unfair to say it, but standard of living isn't the option now. It isn't the reason to work, it's work-life harmony. If you can earn enough money, then you want to feel well earning it, as opposed to earning it just to earn it.
Yes.
So it's
Absolutely.
a really different dynamic now. And
100%.
there's not an acknowledgement of people wanting to be able to set their own boundaries, even.
Yes.
You know, tell that to a man who is 65 and has been in power all his life, that people want to set boundaries.
Yes.
Not on my watch.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It's still my way or the highway type approach.
Yes, but in actual fact, he's in departures lounge, so we should acknowledge
Yes.
that and let him, you know, bring some wisdom, but let what needs to emerge, because there's some of that, like even the bring back to the office vibe going on at the moment is inhibiting what's emerging.
Yes.
You know, and yes, I absolutely agree. There's great value of being in an office and being able to collaborate, and there's great value of relationships. They are stronger when you're, but I'm feeling a nice vibe with you. We've never met in person.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so there is a balance. There is a what is working.
Yeah. But I think for anything,
You
like
know,
say for that return to work one piece is an interesting one, because I think it like anything, it comes, you said it earlier, the how we communicate is the differentiating factor. So there could be positive reasons for people coming back into an office. So for the reasons you said, meeting in person, collaboration, that sort of energy exchange from being in a room with people, you could maybe accelerate a lot of work time in a room together. So you can get all those reasons, and if that's the genuine sort of reasons for getting people back into an office, 2 days, 3 days a week, great. But if it's going back to, they say, that person who's just like, because I want to see basically over my kingdom,
I don't trust my people.
Basically, yes, exactly. And I want to see it all. Then the thing is now, I think what COVID pandemic, and I think then also this, current coming up generation, is people will go, well, I'll just leave. There's much more sort of agency of people going, well, it's all right. Well, if you're forcing me, I'll. So the differentiation factor is one, how you're going to do it. But if you're forcing people into a certain way, some people will go, but people will just go, well, that's fine. I'll find somewhere else.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And it is now we're beyond need to work, and we're beyond standards of living.
Yeah.
We're in another realm.
100%. Well, but it's this thing of kind of like, we're doing this now, and we're doing this podcast, both of us remotely using Wi-Fi tech. So it's the whole thing of now, there's plenty of people, if you've got the inclination, the support, the wherewithal, using just your phone, you can make a living. Do you know what I mean? So it's the thing of like, you don't, the sort of, it's more and more the sort of traditional employment is becoming more fractured or less, because people are, one sense, especially I think the thing of being in a career, in a sense, for one company, one industry for, your whole career is going to become less and less of a thing because of options we have.
Yeah. Well, there's also that thing of for everybody in the world, and I firmly believe this, for everybody who's in the workforce today, there will not be a 40-hour week. You may have, like, I do believe at some stage, and I know lots of governments are talking about, is the universal basic income. That will be a thing at some stage. But if that will come to pass, because there won't be a 40-hour week for everybody. And so you will have people, I'm going to say, doing fractional work. So you may have, if you're good at your job, you may have 3 employers. So you may do fractional work for each of the employers. You see the uprise of virtual assistants because, I can manage my own calendar, but it's nice to have a virtual assistant to do this, but I don't need to hire somebody, So you see the rise already of these not traditional workplaces and people doing things on their own agency, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So it is changing that headset. So that's why I started off really, when I left corporate, I started off really focusing on the workplace when I realized it's a big societal change, because we're coming to a place where, how do you make people purposeful if they don't have work? If their identity was always work before, how do you make somebody purposeful and live in society where they may be paid not to work? And it's not unemployment because everybody's on a universal basic income. So how do you stop people being disenfranchised? Because that goes back to then creating community, creating the tidy towns in the towns, maybe even going back to things, looking at what our big crises in our societies are. We have mental health. How do we create people that will keep people sane in the thing? So there'll be lots of work in, sports and sports support, or physical support to, we don't want to have people in hospitals, because you don't want people who aren't working just sitting watching TV on Netflix all day. You want them doing something. So how do you create purposeful, healthy, mentally and physically healthy, emotionally healthy people if we don't have the structure of work? It's a big shift. So it is that thing of, your little art commune in town, your the people giving, and creating identity from who you are, which means looking back to see how human you are and what are you bringing to the table.
You just said that, like the art. I was going to say, like, the arts is definitely something, the creativity, because almost it's that thing of, as the technology keeps advancing, especially with AI and how that's going to impact further. But there's part of me, and I'm using it. You know what I mean? It's not kid ourselves. I'm using it for part of the podcast, for part of using we all are. So, and it's that thing of everyone is becoming the new norm. That, so again, when you're in front of a person, how you communicate, how you make them feel is going to become more of a differentiating factor again. But the element of then creativity, there's part of me I think with when you get the advancement of technology, you almost have, not in the sense because of the sort of, I'm resisting technology and I don't want to do it, but having this sort of artisan approach is something that's going to have more of a bang for buck, if you know what I mean. So if you go to an artisan bakery, you're going to pay more for that loaf of bread than if you go get it down in Aldi or Lidl or one of the big shops, because it's handmade and stuff. Exactly. So that sort of, as much as the tech is going to keep going forward and there's going to be this train of it, I think there's an element still of someone's low tech is still going to have a place, and if anything, it's going to have more of a place, because it's the opposite, the polar. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I just, now it's funny because this evening I'm hosting a workshop for Project Management Ireland, but it's on leadership play. So we're doing, because the other thing is, leadership is fundamentally changing. You need to be saying, you need to know when you need to lead and when you need to cede, because you're not always the leader. And you shouldn't always be the leader in a room, because you're not always great at everything you're doing. We all have strengths, and it's knowing when to step back and say, okay, James, actually, it's time for you to step up here, because I'm I've done my part, and being comfortable saying I'm leader in this aspect and I'm not the leader in that aspect, I'm the follower. And the shift, like, it really bugged me when I was in corporate, that shift from calling managers to leaders. I just went, managers look down, leaders look forward and up. Big difference.
Yeah.
Big difference. And you don't automatically become a leader just because you've been a manager. You don't
Yeah.
automatically become a manager because you were good at your job. But you know what I mean? It's that shift, and recognizing in the workplace in particular, but also recognizing in society, there are people who have never been called anything who are actually leaders. They influence people to do whatever's to be done. You know, you see it a lot in volunteer groups. The people who are always willing to throw their hat in the, you know, and sort of say, okay, leave it with me. You know, they're leaders. They've never been called it, but they're leaders. And it's that kind of thing of leadership is now about understanding yourself and knowing where you're bringing positive influence, and knowing when to let go and sort of say, I'm comfortable now, I've done my part, and it'll all happen because there are other people who will lead it on from here or from there, or, you know, and that kind of ability. It's like, I often liken it to a, like, you see these fantastic bird swarms. They go around and they go around, but they all know what's happening. You never know who's leading, but they're going somewhere, and then they end up where they're supposed to be. But it's happened in a harmony, and it's happened in a beautiful movement of interaction, support, bringing everybody along, you know, and you just see it's a magnificent thing to witness. But if there are 1,000 birds, there probably are, I'm going to say, 100 leaders in it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, so I'm doing play now, and I'm also, you know, tomorrow night I'll be helping facilitate a Lego series play for a leadership games night again. And it's this thing of, we need to break down everything being so stiff and rigid and infrastructured, and we overthink stuff. So play is a way to get out of your head and into the moment.
Yeah.
Because you have
No, I was reading that because I read a little bit. So tell me, because you just mentioned it there, tell me more about that program, the sort of the Lego play, and how it's used.
It's really interesting, and it's really thought-provoking, because I always say, we have lived in our left brain, our rational brain. We go to school and we focus on the left brain, all the left brain, rational logic, you know, sort of logical problem solving, etc. And it isn't very nurtured, our creative brain. Okay, if you're good at art, you'll get to extra art classes, but there's much more to our creative brain. And 30 to 40% of your creative brain is in your hands. Okay? So when you get to Lego series play, it actually is really quite interesting, because, okay, you do some warm-ups, but you'll have an arc of what you're trying to achieve. So you'll start off with, so generally it's done with the group. So if we were doing it in problem solving, for example, you come to me and you've got a problem, and we've got 6 people. We'll sit around the table. We'll have done some warm-up exercise. We'll all be comfortable with the bricks. We will have discovered that bricks are metaphors, that the brick is a brick, but it actually symbolizes lots of other things. So we'll have done a couple of exercises to understand metaphors. We'll start off then saying, okay, well, we're trying to solve this problem. Everybody will have a big bag of bricks in the middle of the table, a brick soup, all sorts of bricks in there. And we'll say, everybody take 10 minutes and build the problem. Okay. So everybody will make a model of what they perceive the problem to be. Okay? You just build it, your head down. It's a very limited time. And because you haven't had time to prepare this, you don't know what's coming. You're literally putting your hands in the bag, and you're coming out with your hands, and you're building something that you perceive the problem to be. No thinking, very little thinking going on. You're thinking, oh, that red brick might symbol danger. That flag brick over there will symbol a way forward. You're looking at the bricks and you're instinctively doing something. So it's called tinkering. So you're thinking with your hands, not overthinking with your brain. So you're getting out of your brain. So then the bell will ring or you'll stop doing the Lego, and you will then invite everybody to so you'll give everybody a pointer and you'll say, okay, we'll start with this person. We'll ask them to describe their model. So they will describe what they perceive, what their model represents. And that person will then sort of say, okay, that's how I perceive the problem. And then you will invite everybody else at the table, say, does anybody have any questions on James' model? And people would say, yeah, I never understood that about the problem, or I never understood that, or whatever. So the next person then will be invited to describe their perception of their model, which is their perception of the problem. So they're all talking in the objective. They're all pointing at the model. The egos are sort of deflated. The quiet voices are heard because everybody must describe their model. And everybody is invited to ask questions about the model.
Yes.
So then there will be, okay, we've all got models here. Has anybody insights? And somebody will say, well, I hadn't realized that this was a part of the problem. Or in that model over there, I'm seeing that's nothing to do with the problem as far as I'm concerned. I don't understand that piece. So you start then having conversations that you wouldn't. Firstly, so the second thing is you build a shared. So you tell everybody, there have been a few common themes. Can we take the common themes to a shared model because we all agree they're part of the problem?
Yes.
Then things that are left in the individual models, you'll say, let's negotiate what is actually in this. So then you start talking about, well, this aspect of the problem is critical. So everybody justifies their aspect, or they don't. They suddenly say, actually, you're right, it doesn't matter. So you now build a problem that you've all agreed is the actual problem, without anybody falling out with anybody, because you're talking about this model. You've taken all the egos out of it. You've taken you've given voice to everybody. So then you will sort of say, okay, now we're going to start building what we believe could be inhibitors for the problem and enablers for the problem. Back to my enabling again, you see.
Yeah.
But you start building what you see could be enablers. So you spend another while discussing the problem and what are actual enablers. And then you look to see, well, are they realistic? So then you start building the future map of how we're going to resolve the problem. So you can do this with things like problem solving, as I've just kind of described there.
Yeah.
But if you have a new team coming together, you could do it of, build a model of yourself and build special bricks of your superpower, or build special bricks of where you'd love help, or where you feel you need support. And then you go in of what's the team going to look like, who's going to fill the gaps, or, so you always start from the individual. You start from a model. Nobody discusses, nobody's name is used, nobody person is named, nothing comes out in the personal.
Yeah.
But you start playing and everybody's enjoying themselves because who doesn't
they're
love
playing with Lego.
Bricks, and they're playing and it's perceived and you're moving. So it's moving the dial forward much quicker than you would if you tried to do it around a boardroom.
Yes.
Or things that have been holding you up because you used to have language to articulate it.
Yes.
And all of a sudden the bricks give you a different language. You're 100%. Just saying, well, that means stop, or that means danger, or this means, we can go forward, or this means. So all of a sudden you've language where you didn't have language, and you're seeing things that you hadn't seen when you tried to just do it on a flip chart or in a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So it's that bringing back to play and creativity.
Yeah. I'm interested in when you're delivering in that sort of session for anyone, can you spot, because I'm sure the amount of times you've been doing it, can you spot the change in maybe the cynical person at the start, in the sense of the person who's almost like doesn't want to know? Are there people, sure there's people who are thinking, oh Jesus, we're here to play with Lego, I'm such a busy important person, what am I doing playing with Lego? And then when you go through the process and they can start to see the shift, do you have that sort of transition in people where you can actually see them change their perspective through the process?
Well, it's funny. My first experience of a Lego series play was a really bad experience.
Right.
In that the facilitator, now I'm going back probably 5 years or more. The facilitator didn't understand the process, but knew people were using Lego for innovation.
Right.
And we had a
Yes.
creativity workshop. And like, it was funny because at the end of the day, we all had a great day building Lego. We had a great day building Lego.
Yeah.
But you just came out going, well, now, what was the purpose of that? And then I went to one,
Yes.
and it was really transformative. And like, I'm only doing these workshops since this year, but I went to one earlier this year, facilitated by a coach, Albert Quigley, who really did a great job. And I really got it because he explained the process of the models,
yes.
also coming from the individual to the shared, and negotiating in and creating future vision and understanding your enablers and your inhibitors. And then after doing that, I was so inspired. I just sort of said, okay, I'm becoming a facilitator in that. So I did a facilitating training, and it made so much more sense. But like any workshop I've done, and I've done a few now, everybody's gotten something out of it, and they've gone out of the room feeling empowered.
Yes.
You just kind of they're just going away going, oh yeah, I'm thinking a bit differently.
Yes. And
like
that's the key to anything. And I think from all the things you
problem myself, I play. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that was the key to any of these things. Yeah, and it's wanting someone. The Lego, or in that particular sort of workshop, as you say, it's the demonstration and a way of manifesting a person's perspective, thoughts, fears, worries, ideas, whatever, in something outside of themselves. So it's easier then to communicate because it's less personal, less ego. And then for people and when people are asking questions, you're asking questions of something that's outside of the person, not the person themselves. So it's taking away, as you say, if someone's just in a boardroom and just disagreeing with it, because it becomes more personal, becomes more. And exactly, whereas this is a kind of it's a physical thing, and it's so I can, and but it's understanding that it's a way of, as you say, it's a facilitating approach. There's a meaning behind it, and as soon as you get a meaning behind something, it enables conversation and enables people to think differently, then to empower them. Then it has to be powerful. But I love the fact of all the things, obviously, and we're going to go into them now. The things you do, it's what I said there before. As much as technology is advancing, we're using something for communication and expression that is as low tech as you can get.
Yeah, and that is the, like, I often think as Irish people we're a bit mad. We and I think it's really interesting in this world. I have a young friend, and she wrote an article earlier this year about dualism in a world where polarization is massive. But so if you think we're a nation in our, natural form, who don't do either or, they do either and. So it's this thing of, we have to coexist in this world. So it can't be either I'm technically enabled and I'm going to go down the tech route, or I'm human and I'm going to be all heart. You have to be both, because
100%.
We have to coexist. So we have to be either and. So I'm not saying we have to use the technology, but I'm also saying we possibly are overusing technology, and we need to come back and go to things that help us have the conversation and help us have the realization that actually we've got loads because, oh God, I hate saying this about our schooling, but we've loads of suppression in our schooling of what is
Yeah.
great in us. You know,
Yeah.
we got up and we walked and we ran and we learned how to do everything. We fell on our behinds a million times. We fell off our bikes. We went to school and we were told to sit still. And we stopped that experimentation. And failure is a big thing. Failure became a thing. I hate the football managers that get sacked after 3 losing matches. You just kind of go, how can he build a team on 3 matches? We need to try and fail and figure out what were the winning combinations in our failure, what's going to serve us going forward, because we instinctively know there's something better there. We need to be left to play with it, to figure it out. We need to be given space to fail and learn, to move on. You'll never do it. Like I was always a great, let's take it apart and have a look and see what happens, you know? And I love a little bit of, oh God, how does that actually work? Let's have a little look, you know?
Yeah.
And I do love that. And I'll continue to do that.
Yeah.
But I also know I need to help other people feel comfortable in this world, and they don't want to do that. So it's that enabling of how do we bring the people with us, but they also need to coexist in this world. So they need to know the technology, and they need to be saying to, you know, people who are in power, politicians, of are we not actually legislating for that? The legislation is so far behind the advancement. We need people to be able to say, okay, I'm not happy that Elon Musk launched an AI companion for teenagers. I don't want my teenager, even though I've no teenagers left, but I don't want a teenager learning how to create adult relationships only with AI companions. So we need to be able to sort of say, okay, I know they exist. What do they do? Like even understanding that some of the AI companions, some of the free ones are definitely just mirroring you, what you say, what you do. They want to be liked by you. So they're going to reinforce your biases. They're going to reinforce your
Yeah.
narratives. You're going to reinforce. So a parent needs to know that in a way. They needn't use it, but they need to be able to say to a child, actually, no, because that's reinforcing you and you're not getting a loving challenge to what your thinking is. You're not getting a challenge that will help you mature as an adult to critically think. You're not getting a challenge that would say, "I don't be stupid." That's, you know, your pal,
Yeah.
real life pals will tell you, cop on.
Yeah.
You know, so we need to be cognizant that the world is changing. We need to be aware of it so we can have mature conversations. And we need to be
Absolutely.
able to, you know, because if we sleepwalk into this, there'll be detrimental effects to it. You
Absolutely.
know,
So what's your would you say is your core sort of business of what you do now? I know you say about the facilitation we just talked about there. You started doing that, but what's the sort of core thing that you do to help, whether it be companies or
yeah.
people?
I'm doing quite a bit of coaching, one-on-one coaching with leaders and people who um, I'm doing a group that I'm doing, they're leaders of their leadership team. So they're looking to redesign their business. So that's quite interesting. I'm doing a couple of individual leaders. I'm doing people who are, I've also got a couple of people on the go who have stepped out because the system isn't suiting them and they really want to find a new way. I have 2 different people. One has been pushed out and the other has stepped out. So I'm doing quite a lot of people finding their agency in this world, and hopefully when they find their agency they've got an influence of the
Yeah.
people around. I do as much talking as I can about people. Try, you know, wake up, smell
Yeah.
what's happening, and don't be afraid to be too human, because the world needs more humans,
Yeah.
you know, and the world needs more, you know, advocacy for the humans. Not and I'm not saying you have to go around and hug everybody. It is that thing of,
Yes.
we need to master this because we are the masters of the universe. And if we don't master it, we're giving it away.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I still think it's, from my perspective, when they're thinking of the tech, it's always this is just my take on it, was always, it's another tool that I can use. It's something that can enable me to move faster, get a bit quicker at something, maybe raise my game in things that I'm not as good at, that I can sort of learn through it, if you know what I mean. And that, because I think that it's the point you said earlier as well, like in some ways with the tech, and say for an individual, that whereas before maybe you would had to have hire a lot of people to do certain things, you can kind of that you can that bridge that education gap with certain things and learn that a little bit more. There's maybe steps you don't have to maybe know as much, but it's again, it's further democratizing the knowledge that's out there. It's putting it a bit more in the person's hands again. But again, it's that sort of, it's there as a tool, not a crutch, because I think then you can kind of become it's the trying to avoid being too reliant, on it. But it's still my big thing though, for anyone, and it very much I think echoes what you're saying here, is it's this piece, it's the communication, it's the talking, it's the listening, it's the bringing it out of a person. That's where it's at.
And it's also saying, yes, you're talking about supports, and crutches would implicate you're not critically thinking. We need to be understanding where the data is coming from, which is a really 100% big key to all of this. How valid is that data? Because miscommunication is massive in the world now. And it's that critical thinking. So to me, the key things people need to be working on in these days: building trust relationships, building skills. Schools need to be really helping people understand how they critically think. I often say to people, we're in a phase of learn for now, not for life. But there are skills we need to be learning for life, which is critical thinking, advanced problem solving, building relationships. And they're the human things. They're the things that we 100%. Were designed to do. So anything that's skills, you can, if you're good at it, you learn it, So the skills are completely different to our human attributes. And we have been schooled in our skills for years. We've forgotten that we need to be building people. I often say, like, the first industrial revolution introduced industrial schools. And at that time, back in the 1800s, people who were educated went on a grand tour, and they were exposed to the arts, to culture, to diversity, to other people. And they came back and they designed the societies. But we have mixed up education and schooling to now that what we call education is probably 80% schooling. And we need to get back to that education of free thinking, critical thinking, free radicals, let them out of your mind. Just go mad.
Well,
that's why I like the play and the
absolutely, because I've got sort of now in the UK, got nieces just going through that sort of education sort of milestones, in sense of would be equivalent of leaving cert, junior certs at GCSEs, A levels, potentially going to university and things, and having to and even when I think back now, when they're sort of like 16, 17, 18, having to taking an exam again at that point in time. It was crazy when I did it, crazy, I'm pretty sure when you did it, that it determines so much of a factor of what you're going to do next, and having to make almost like doing this particular subject or that particular subject and getting this particular grade in that subject can enable you of what you're going to do next. But in some way that is going to have any sort of bearing on what you do, as you say, what type of employment that will be, the type of job you'll get, as opposed to, so in some ways limiting oneself so young And it's not to say that it's not an important time in a young person's life. It's a huge moment in their lives, but it's such a sort of moment. But it again, it doesn't feel like it's moved on in the 20 years or more since I was at that point. Do you know what I mean? If anything, it feels the same, if not more restrictive. That's the ironic thing. So that's what I feel for any young person now, because it's like, if you don't hit this bar, it could feel like basically whatever plans you had are over. And it will probably be easier for me to get on to whatever graduate program they wanted to do than it would be for them. Do you know what I mean? As a mature student, I would probably find it easier to get into that university degree than they would, which is crazy.
That's not
it
fair,
is. No,
Yeah.
I could literally do a diploma, 6-month diploma or something in whatever. Now, and I could, obviously, as long as I got the money, I can pay for it. I could probably get in. Do you know what I mean? But they're kind of like, that feels wrong. That if me in my 40s could get in a place easier than the person because they missed out on the points on either Leaving Cert or A levels, that just seems a bit out there.
And then you kind of say, in today's tsunami, a 4-year degree, maybe even, I'll even throw out computer science. You just kind of go, really? What's that going to be? What's that going to be in 4 years' time? And you just kind of go like, is our education aligned to where we're at? Anyway, that's a completely
that's a whole other absolutely 100%. But because obviously you've been in it for so long, I'd have to get a bit more of your take on AI at the moment, just in general, in a sense of where you think it's at, where we think we're at with it.
I still think that there aren't enough conversations happening. I see some really interesting things, like I think it's in Denmark. They've given every national in Denmark copyright over their own features of their own image. So I think that's a really interesting one. So you can take my photos and use them without my permission. So I just think we're so far behind in legislating about it. The advances are happening. Like I said about Musk trying to put out an app that would allow teenagers to have AI companions without the knowledge of their parents, potentially. That needs to be, monitored and really controlled. So I think there is a huge thing. There's such rushes to adopt things. We need to kind of say, are we adopting for adopting's sake? Are we adopting for progress, sake? Having worked in industry, I love some of the robotics. I love the way some of the robotics are really helping people with medical challenges, even in the workplace, helping with workplace safety, with lifting, the exoskeletons that can help you lift, etc. So I love some of those advances. They're fantastic, and they will do wonderful things for us. I love the things that, the diagnosis that are happening for doctors. I think that's going to be great advancement. But again, when I'm quite happy to take a photo of my toe and send it to a doctor and let him put it through an AI and come back and tell me I have an ingrown toenail. Quite happy about that. If I have a tumor, I'm not so happy, a robot coming back and giving me a report.
Yes.
These are the lines we need to have the conversation.
Yes.
What are we happy to accept?
Absolutely.
I love the fact I wouldn't necessarily have to go into the doctor's surgery all the time now. I could ring in and do whatever. So there are lots of things that I see are going to have positive things, but we really need to be facilitating the conversations.
Yes.
And that's what I try to do. I often go to, community groups and have little talks with people who typically wouldn't be in business groups, to sort of say, go on, ask somebody about it. Like when the politicians were coming around at the last election, my poor old politician who rang on my door, I was asking him, how are you going to build a community that will be purposeful when we're all on the universal basic income? Sure, he looked at me as if I had 10 heads.
Yeah.
To be putting those conversations out there, and that's where I kind of feel, of course I'm using it. Of course I am, so have no doubt. But I also want to provoke people into having the conversations.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's a really important thing, because I think there's a danger, in a sense, that because for so long now as well, and that Ireland especially is a very much a hub for the big tech companies, and it's obviously a huge part of the infrastructure and the employment structure and the tax structure and everything in Ireland, for better for worse, or whatever we want to call it. But if we don't, as you say, have those conversations at all levels, and we just keep chasing the money, you know what I mean?
You're just sleepwalking into a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's being brave enough to have those conversations and engage. It's the whole thing of, it's all about engagement on both sides, I think, and from engagement, the whole thing, because and not pretending that it's not happening, because it's here. It's literally, and I think people are using it. They don't even know they're using it. They go, people will be saying, I haven't used any AI. And it's like, you go on any website now, it's in there. You just don't know it's there.
I say to people, do you use the GPS in your car?
Yeah, exactly.
And have you recently bought a washing machine or a fridge
or
a cooker?
Yeah.
You're using it.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. No, it's I know I think it's but it's very similar, I suppose, with your whole career, in sense of but what I find is you're putting yourself into that forefront, and sort of like, there is this, it's coming, but I'm going to be there to try and have the conversations as we need to, as it keeps coming at us.
Yeah. Well, it was very funny. This last week, I just met a previous boss of mine, a man I adore now, and we were out for lunch, and it was so funny because when I was leaving, I was very fortunate always to be surrounded by really good technical people. When I joined the pharma industry, we're only 35 members in the factory I started with. And during my 20 years in the factory here, we grew to 500 staff. So it was a big growth, and we, as part of the IT department, we put in all the systems, etc., etc. And but I was very fortunate with the recruits I had, great people. But when I was leaving, I always said, like, oh, they'll probably be delighted to see me go, because I was never very good at IT. I always knew a man who, I always knew a person. I always had a person who knew the answer,
Yes.
like around me. And my ex-manager, Alan, just said to me, he said, you were never about the technology. He said, you were always about the people around you. He said, when the systems would go down, you would sit on the phone and answer the phone to all the users. You'd get the tech team into the office and say, okay, what's happening? Tell me what's happening. I'd sit on the phone and answer all the users, and they'd fix the problem. I'd let nobody near them. So they were enabled, and then
their work.
And I'd sort of there going, yes, we're dealing with it. Yes, I'll be on the phone. Yes. And then I'd be telling the steering committee what was going on, but he was there going, you were always about the people,
Yeah.
So I was saying, yeah, I had that title. I held it from somebody who could have done the job.
Yeah, exactly. Love it.
Yeah. But it was always about the people.
Absolutely. Well, and then and still, as you say, still doing it now. There's always a question I like to ask everyone who comes on the show, Marie-Louise, which is, are there any quotes or phrases that are important to you?
Well, there's one that I've been using quite a bit recently, and it's that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that's kind of indicative of where we're at. That has been attributed to loads of people. Elizabeth Warren is one of the ones that, and it's been attributed to lots of people. But it is that thing of, come to the table. Come to the table. Because we have to have those conversations, and it's, that's why I just really want people to sort of say, yeah, we've a beautiful world and we can continue to live here and thrive here. But we need to be at the table to decide what's it going to like, because it's emerging now. and we can influence it as it emerges. But if it comes out and the genie's out of the bottle, you know, we're in an emergent time, and that's when you've got the time to influence.
Absolutely. Who would you say have been your biggest influences?
Well, I did start off with my dad, sort of saying, and I probably have an image of him that is completely unrealistic because I was so young when he died. Because I've built that image on his brother saying, he was the best of us, of my mother having been really in love with him, of that poem that came to him, and I have bits of him. So that kind of, I've built an image of him, and we're a family that we were kids in the 60s, so it's only in recent years we actually talk about stuff. Talked about for donkey's years, and it's only in recent years we talk about stuff. So my image is probably unrealistic, but I think it served me well. I've tried to live. I've also, as I sort of said, I've had some wonderful, I'm going to say mentors rather than managers, because I would say it was very difficult to manage as I was coming up in my career. A bit bolshy, a bit, no, we'll do it this way, a bit try. Like, it was great in the bank because we weren't overmanaged. But there were at times when I was in the pharma, that I possibly would have caused problems for managers because I'm hard to manage in a way. And that's probably why I've stepped out now, because I've just sort of said, okay, I didn't, as I sort of said to you, I'm a 60s child. So obviously I'm in the departures lounge with that leadership team. And I didn't want to wait till somebody said to me, here's the scrap heap, here's a clock, enjoy. Because I actually feel as if I have as much energy as I've had all my life. And I don't really want to sleepwalk my way into that. And I didn't want to wait till I'd even lost a bit of confidence. Of that, okay, here's the scrap heap type conversation. That might have dented my confidence. So I just kind of wanted to get out, create something that I felt could impact. And the people who have mentored me and supported me, I get great validation from them now, even. So they know who they are because I meet them for coffees and I meet them. I've created that community of people, but I think this now, we need to reach out to the people who we feel can help us move forward and create communities and shift the dial.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think even just from this conversation now, I think it sounds like, as you say, what you knew kind of you needed to get out of and to do for yourself, but I think, but also to impact on a wider scale. I think, in some ways, by you could, as you say, stayed within the corporate structure, but your impact would have been to that particular company, industry, whatever. Now, where I think now it's you've got this wider canvas as such, you know what I mean, to lean it back into the sort of creative aspect of where are the, from, as you say, still working within leaders and teams to the community groups, such a more wider breadth of people that you can have that impact on, and without that sort of potential restriction of having to, exactly, from a corporate entity, absolutely. So I think the corporate potential losses everyone else's potential gain, I think, with you working with so many more different groups. Absolutely.
Well, it was that realization of when I started saying, well, what do I actually do? What will I actually do?
Sure.
Realizing that the impact is societal, much more so than just corporate. And while I can contribute to corporates in their transformation and help them with things like that, it is about having conversations one-on-one as well, and conversations with people who I see feel disenfranchised, or conversations with art groups or, other groups that are saying, will we fit? And you're just like, going, of course you will.
Yes. Yeah, because I'm sure there is that element of, it's come up a few times actually in recent conversations where I would have previously labeled it fear in a sense from people. But if anything, what's been the sort of reframe that I've got from people, different sort of expertise of people, is not necessarily people feel fear, is they feel unsafe. And it's a bit of a distinction. So, they don't want to feel unsafe in a digital world or that sort of, so it's a different, I was like, it's a real subtle use of change in language, but I think there is a difference. People just don't want to, they want to feel safe in a space versus I'm afraid of it. It's like, no, I want to feel safe. So I think there's an element of that to this as well.
Yeah, and I think they want to regain their agency, feel as if they've got not necessarily control, but that they will be valued in it.
Yes, absolutely. It's been an absolute
interesting times.
Interesting times, as they say. Absolutely, it's been fascinating and interesting to talk to you. And when we could do another hour, I'm sure. Alas, we have to finish it today. But I have one more question for you, which is it's absolutely. What's important for your future?
Well, I suppose what's important for me is to nurture myself so that I have the energy to go forward, because not everybody wants to hear you. So you have to sort of accept, okay, some people aren't. So I've really, I would say in the past, I didn't put myself first, but I'm now beginning to put myself, not selfishly, but look after myself so that I have the energy to keep going and
100%.
Hopefully make a positive impact,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll have somebody stand at my grave saying, Casey, he was there.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
I nobody will recognize me as Casey.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but I live up to that,
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it's I think it's for all the things that it's again, we could have gone so much for being, you say, like from the very forefront of tech coming into Ireland, literally, the delivery of the first computers to sort of still having that sort of want and willingness and drive or excitement to try and where we are now with moving into the space, but always, again, like that manager said or that mentor said, it's always about the people. I think it's exciting for anyone who obviously comes into contact with you that you're there and help them along and give them hopefully that bit of agency that they're to fit in this ever-changing sort of tech world. I want to make sure with that in mind that people will know how to follow you, connect with you. We'll make sure anything is in the show notes, but and links wise. But if you would like to share where people can connect and follow you online.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn as Marie-Louise Marshall, easy to find. And I have a website, www.no-marielouisemarshall.com. Easy peasy.
100%. There you go. Well, those links will be in the notes as well for anyone who wants to connect and follow what Marie-Louise does. It's been absolutely a pleasure to chat to you, and I really do thank you for your time. Thank you so much for chatting to me.
No, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for the opportunity. I know I
absolutely not at all. This is what it's all about. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if it resonated, share it with someone who might need it too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or ask a question, and let's keep the conversation going. I'm James Dean, and I'll be back soon with another real conversation to help you reconnect with what truly matters. Until then, take care and stay curious.